All right, we're live. All right, good morning, everyone. It is 9:30 on Wednesday. I don't have the date in front of me. I guess it is the 29th. We are picking up continued work, witness testimony on S-206, an act relating to licensure of early childhood educators by the Office of Professional Regulation. And we are going to go right into our witness list. We're going to start off with Andrew Prouton, State Director of Education Approvals, Agency of Education. How are you, sir?
Good morning.
Good morning. First time here?
Yes, yep, to this committee. So thank you. Yeah, for the record, my name is Andrew Prouton. I am with the Agency of Education. I'm the director of our Ed Program Approvals Division. So that means I oversee our educator licensing, educator preparation teams. Those are kind of the most of the bread and butter of my work. I also oversee our independent school team, home study, a couple other small miscellaneous federal programs. So I'm here today to talk about a very specific technical concern. And I really kind of am just trying to emphasize that this is a real problem that could come out of the language being used in this bill. It's a little bit wonky, so apologies in advance. But you can see I've included in my testimony a single page letter that I wrote, as well as a double-sided page from the National Association for Teacher Licensing and Preparation, Jimmy Adams. I had asked him to write a letter to really kind of give some weight to show that this is a real problem that could arise. So as far as the merits of the bill in this plan, the agency is supportive. We do want to support our early childhood workforce. We think that in general, this is a good idea. The biggest concern is the use of the language early childhood educator license. An educator license is reserved nationally for an individual who has completed a bachelor's degree program that includes specific requirements around student teaching, testing, some very specific requirements in order to get an educator license in their state. So I think an unintended consequence is that in calling these educator licenses for folks who do not meet those requirements, we're now creating a compliance issue for ourselves in terms of teacher license reciprocity, as well as recognition of our preparation programs. So in my conversations with other states on this specific bill, shared language, I've been told by other states that they would have to reevaluate reciprocity with our state if this language were to be used. It's quite simple. I think that there's a lot of really great positives. Again, really support the idea of moving forward and professionalizing and elevating the profession, to borrow some terms. But I think our recommendation would be to just make sure to add one word for it to be an early childhood education professional license. I think that doesn't fully solve, but in the conversations with the national, Oregon, other states, it's a fair compromise. It helps break apart some of that ambiguity, because at that point, we're talking about a professional license within the Office of Professional Regulations, as opposed to an educator license that is normally reserved for state education agencies and have those minimum qualifications of a bachelor's degree plus approved educator preparation programs. That's the big, technical wonky component of it. I think the other component is that the language really can create a lot of confusion, both for the public and for hiring organizations. If someone were to apply with a level 1 early childhood educator license, a new school HR director might think, oh, they have a professional license through the AOE. Let's give them the offer, hire them. Then someone else who's a little bit more aware of the process would take a look and say, hey, this person doesn't have a bachelor's degree. This isn't a licensed teacher, right? This is a very real type of problem. It's not just a hypothetical. We do have situations where offers are made to people for teaching positions and they don't have the full qualifications. So I think this could add to that confusion and create more situations such as that. It also can be confusing for the public. Someone sees a UPK program, the teacher only has an early childhood level 1 license. That's not as high qualified as an early childhood educator 3. That's not the case because we're using a shared language. An early childhood educator level 1 license through the Agency of Education really has that highest level of qualifications. But then we're also using early childhood educator level 1 for someone who doesn't have college experience. So this shared language is really ripe to create a lot of confusion. And those are really the 2 points. I mean, pretty simple. I'm happy to answer any questions or explain some of the specifics around the national agreement that I think we would be in violation of if we were to move forward with this language. But it's pretty simple and straightforward from us. It's just a simple addition of a word.
I guess my first question is, since this is an S bill, did you or anyone from your agency share this perspective with the Senate?
Yep. The testimony, the 1-page testimony is the exact same testimony I provided. I just changed the 2 and the date. And I asked after that, NASDAQ, Jimmy from NASDAQ, to provide a letter to support our concerns with that national perspective.
Recango, then Waters Evans.
Thank you. Does the AOE have issues with this licensure coming from AOE for public schools and OPR for non-public schools?
So,
See that being a problem?
yeah, I think it's nuanced, right? It's not a simple yes or no. It certainly makes sense for OPR to be in this space for these private programs. Where it gets complicated is where we have so much crossover between our public and private schools. And realistically, I think if we think of over the next 5 years, unless we can find some California money, we're going to be expanding those public-private partnerships. So I think that there could be down the road some more confusion, especially if we're using that shared terminology of an early childhood educator license.
And did you submit your written testimony to our committee assistant?
I did last week, so I did also print out some paper copies. If there was some confusion, I can pass
No,
those.
that's okay.
Okay. Did you? Looks like you want one. Here's
I hear these key already.
Great, thank you.
Here's the. Okay. Yeah.
I'll get it on our webpage as well for today.
Waters Evans, then Pismo.
That was my first question, is what testimony are we talking about? Because I haven't seen it. And then you clarified for me, I might have missed it when you were talking. When you said that the shared language would be in violation of a national agreement, can you talk more about that? Like, who has the agreement and what is it?
Yeah. So the National Association for State Directors of Teacher Education and Certification, NASDAQ. So
I keep going into like a SEC
Okay.
realm on that one.
so this is the organization most folks are familiar with, teacher reciprocity. You're a teacher in one state, you move to another, they'll recognize your license.
Yeah.
So this is the agreement that allows that to happen. And so my 1-page testimony, I pulled some quotes, I linked directly to that agreement. So we as a state have signed that. We've promised to follow the requirements of the qualifications for a licensed educator. And we've also promised within that to ensure that we have language that's very clear and understandable for the public and for other states.
Okay. And then my other question is, this is just not always an area in which we are involved. So I just have questions about it. So when you say people get hired, I'm going to make a very simplistic comparison
Yeah.
here. When you say people get hired or made an offer, and then it turns out that they don't have the correct qualifications, wouldn't that be like someone applying for a job is like an ankle surgeon, and then it turns out that they're a veterinarian, but they're both called doctor? Like, can you explain how people, I know.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like there are lots of different ways that a person can be a doctor and people don't get hired accidentally to be like a dentist when they're a chiropractor or whatever. You know what I mean? Like.
Yeah,
That's the
so.
part I don't get.
Yeah, so one thing that can happen, and is that there may be someone who moves to Vermont, they held a temporary license in another state. So they were not a professional license. They did not complete all of the requirements of this agreement, but they were working with a temporary license in Massachusetts. They moved to Vermont, they apply for a job. I'm a teacher. They show that Massachusetts temporary license, that the person gets hired, they contact us, and we say, that's not a reciprocal license, right? So that is something that happens today.
Okay.
So I think by now including, here's my early childhood educator license, that could create more situations of that happening. Again, especially as we start to expand early childhood education being provided in our public schools.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Brett Bisno.
We had heard previous testimony of a suggestion of the licensing being called early childhood professional,
Mhm.
taking out the educator part. Would that simplify it even more?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, so we've been having this conversation for a number of years. We've proposed a number of different alternative. This year, we decided that ECE professional as of what we felt was as close, as far as a compromise as we're willing to really go on that. I think part of the merit is someone has a degree, an associate's in early childhood education. They want to get that recognition. I think that's very fair. I think early childhood professional would help clarify even further and address these concerns even better.
Anything else for our guest? All right, thank you. Feel free to stick with us in case anything else comes up while we're in this.
Thank you.
We're waiting on our next guest to arrive, it seems. So we're gonna go to our friends on Zoom, Caitlin and Laura. How are you?
Good.
Yeah, good morning. How are you guys? Do you
Yeah.
want to go first? Do you want me to go first?
I can go first.
Go ahead.
Yeah, please. The table is yours.
Hi. So my name is Alora Zargo, and I'm from Brookline, Vermont, and I am a freshman at the University of Vermont. Before college, I attended the early childhood education program at the Wyndham Regional Career Center in Brattleboro. And after I completed my required coursework, I earned more college credit and job experience as a youth apprentice. I graduated high school qualified for an ECE 1 license. Programs like the one at the Wyndham Regional Career Center make this a real career, and I think our state should support more early career opportunity pathways like the Career Center helps do. An early childhood educator profession gives me a vision for my career path, and a clear career path gives me a reason to stay in Vermont. When I first started this path in high school, I thought working in early childhood education would be fun, but I didn't really understand how much responsibility that kind of job involved. I think a lot of people think of it as an easy job, or I like to say that people think of it as a pit stop in life. It's a way to something else. They think you're just playing with kids. I can do that. But I've learned that early childhood education is much more than playing with kids. It's about building relationships, making decisions based on child development, communicating with families, and showing up prepared to support every child in your care. It's also being someone a child trusts every single day. So it takes a lot of work to make all that play look really easy. If you have a license to work with young children, it will help ensure the people doing the work are serious about it and have the knowledge they need to succeed and to help children succeed, because they are our future. I've already seen in the years that I've worked in childcare, people come and go from the centers that I've worked in, because they weren't prepared for the challenges of the job. I want And I want to do my best, and I want to work with a system that supports me for doing my best. And I want to work alongside other people who want to do their best for these kids. Licensure will ensure those who are passionate about this work will be able to commit to it as a career, which will ultimately reduce turnover and ensure that children are cared for by dedicated, knowledgeable professionals. If you look at it like a career, there are a lot of ways to get it in the door. I'm more than halfway to ECE level 2 qualifications, and I have a lot of college credits and a very clear vision of my future. I plan to continue being an advocate and educating myself because I'm already almost done with my first year as a freshman in college at the University of Vermont. And I want to continue advocating for this field, and I want to get my master's degree. And eventually, it would be really amazing for me to be able to do something like my mentor, Kim Freeman, did for me, and help other young adults like find their passion in education. My program connected to school, college credit, and real work experience in a way that made this path feel really real and really achievable for me that I definitely wouldn't have gotten without the Career Center. Licensure creates a pathway for students like me to envision a lifelong career in early childhood education. It's not just a pit stop, it's a meaningful, rewarding profession. The work we do has a real impact on children's lives in everyday moments, and that's why it matters who is doing it. Thank you for the opportunity to share my experience and my perspective.
Thank you.
I'm gonna add on if that's okay before we take questions. Is that all
Oh.
right?
Please.
So for the record, I'm Dr. Caitlin Northey, and I am an associate professor of early childhood education at the University of Vermont. And today I'm joining one of our incredible undergraduate students, Alora Zargo, who had a pretty great preparation pathway into our institution. And it shows how an intentionally aligned preparation system can create more efficient degree pathways for students. Alora has transferred in so many courses and credits that I actually have not had her as a student yet, but I love that she's such a fierce advocate for the field. In our state, 4 institutions of higher education, Champlain College, St. Michael's College, University of Vermont, and Vermont State University, provide 5 early childhood education bachelor's degree programs. Each program is accredited to prepare educators to teach young children with slight variations regarding the specific agency of education licensure endorsements educators can earn. For example, at the University of Vermont, our undergraduate early childhood majors earn a Bachelor of Science degree in early childhood. Upon completion and program completion and graduation, UVM recommends these graduates for an Agency of Education teaching license with a birth through 3rd grade endorsement. To earn our recommendation for AOE licensure, our UVM students must demonstrate core competencies through the Praxis 1 exam or other approved equivalents, complete all required coursework to earn bachelor's degree and gain the general ed, pedagogical, and methods knowledge needed to teach young children. They have to have a cumulative 3.0 GPA and a GPA of 3.0 in their major courses. They complete required field experience hours, including a student teaching internship where they have to earn a grade of B or better. And at UVM, our students must also score mostly 4 or higher on our dispositions rubric. They also have to graduate. There are 2 other additional requirements that are needed to be recommended for licensure, but they're not needed in order to graduate. The first is earning a passing score on the Vermont licensure portfolio and earning a qualifying score on the content assessment, the Praxis 2 exam. Once UVM recommends a graduate for AOE licensure, they can begin the process, completing an application for the AOE license, getting their fingerprints taken. I want to outline these steps to show the differences between someone graduating with a bachelor's degree in early childhood and the additional steps needed to graduate and become an AOE licensed teacher. Standardized assessments can present additional challenges or barriers to becoming a state agency or department licensed teacher. And in higher education, we've also seen that for some students, successfully completing the teacher licensure portfolio can be a challenge and a barrier. I'm a strong supporter of the AOE's teacher licensure system, and I believe it's meeting the needs of our public schools, but it's currently only serving a subset of the early childhood workforce. Vermont's youngest children and their families are served by a variety of early care and education settings outside of public schools. The current regulatory system for childcare regulates programs, not people, which limits our ability to hold individuals accountable for unprofessional conduct and signal that someone should not work with children. As the proposed licensure system covers individuals who are not currently served by existing systems, none of the licensure categories are duplicative to what exists now. And I think it actually complements those existing systems. We know that young children, families, and society benefit from having early childhood educators with the competencies and expertise needed to support their learning and development. S206 addresses gaps in our existing regulatory systems that leave children, families, programs, and workforce vulnerable to harm. And it also helps ensure that early childhood educators have the knowledge and expertise needed to work with young children, supporting the improvement of their future education experiences and improving our public K through 12 education system. Because those children are going to go in more ready.
Thank you. Questions from the table for our guests? Seeing no hands for the moment. If you don't mind sticking with us while we go through the rest of our witnesses in case something pops up. Yeah, please stick around. Ooh, wait.
No, it's not for you.
Oh,
Actually, I
okay.
have a question for our previous witness.
Oh, sure. Yes.
Can-
Yeah,
Yeah, thanks.
come back up, sir. Please re-identify yourself.
I'm
for the
asking
record.
another very elementary question. No early childhood.
Zadooch.
I know, I was gonna say no pun intended. Can you tell me why, is it possible, and if not, why not? Can't OPR and the Agency of Education work together to come up with like one system or one path from like the licensure all the way through OPR and then all the way through to whatever certification you need for the whole thing? Like, I don't understand why there are two separate things going on when there are two offices and agencies underneath the same umbrella of state government. Why can't there be collaboration and to come up with a system together?
Yeah, and again, for the record, Andrew Proughton, Agency of Education. So yeah, this has been a conversation we've been having for several years. I mean, as I've said, I think that the big picture of this process, we're supportive of having a pathway for an individual to go through stackable credentials, right? This opens up so many different opportunities for career tech education, accessing Perkins funds. So many really great opportunities with that. And we're absolutely willing to have conversations. We are having conversations on finding that transition from that highest level OPR license to ours. As you've heard, many of the folks who would be going for this proposed DECE 3 would be going through a teacher preparation program and qualify for ours anyway. Really, the sticking point is on this term of the early childhood educator license. I understand that there is a large national movement to elevate the profession of early childhood educators. I'm supportive of those goals. I totally acknowledge anyone who's working with kids is a little e educator. But there's some very serious technical consequences if we are using this language in this way. And it's something that we have been very vocal for several years now. And I think, as a consequence, right, this could create more confusion. It could make it harder for Vermonters who are moving to other states to get that reciprocity. Program graduates who, so many of our colleges, their candidates move back to their home states, right? I've been told by other states that they may end up wanting to have additional requirements for someone with a degree in early childhood education from Vermont to ensure that they've met all of the standards outlined in our national agreement, right? The portfolio, the testing, all of that. So, we've been having conversations. We've been absolutely collaborative and coordinating throughout this process. I think this language is really the sticking point here.
And, so you're saying that the reason that like the pathway hasn't been created from level 3 all the way up to the AOE certification is because there's a disagreement about that term?
Pretty much. I mean, so that, right, like from the position that we're in at the agency, right? Like my job is literally to maintain high standards for licensed educators. Those standards are defined by this national agreement, a bachelor's degree, state test, et cetera, as you just heard. So if we create an educator license that does not meet those qualifications, we now have, unfortunately, there's no better way to say it, a lower standard for an educator license in our state. And so that's, I think it's a very serious consequence that is just, it's the tune I've been singing all along. And I think there's a lot of ways that we can move forward and create this pathway if we can be a little more flexible with the language being used.
Okay, so. And I'm just having some thoughts about the fact that, so OPR, AOE can't agree on this one thing. And so now it's coming through the path of creating legislation to choose a side. Is that fair to say?
I guess so, yeah.
Okay.
Certainly not a position I want to be in.
No, I understand. I guess we've just been hearing about this we've been talking about this for weeks. And it seems like now all of a sudden it's been like pinpointed that this is a one singular issue. But maybe, I mean, I know there are lots of issues, but like I understand both sides of like why there's a disagreement. And I'm not sure that I've quite personally reached a point where I know which one is the right thing to do, or the best path forward, because keeping the children at the forefront, right? Because those are the ones who are going to benefit from all of this. But I guess that's just something that I hadn't really considered until this morning. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks.
Representative Hango. then
Thank you.
Duke.
Building on Representative Waters Evans' comment just now and her line of questioning, it's my understanding from several years ago that the education and care of children of early childhood age was the jurisdiction for that was given to the Agency of Human Services, whereas the jurisdiction for children who are school aged was given to the AOE, which always had that. So there has been for many years now this dichotomy in who controls early childhood and school age children. So I think it comes from that dichotomy that there are these dual agencies that have oversight now of children who are ages, I'm just going to throw this out there because I don't know if this is technically correct or not, ages 3 to 6.
Okay.
Those kids that are preschool age. And that, to me, is the crux of the whole problem, is that there are two agencies in two different settings that have jurisdiction over that specific age group of children. And it goes way back to the decision having been made that AHS was going to oversee the birth to school age children, because back then it was really just daycares. It wasn't preschools. And preschool, particularly universal preschool, came into being. And then suddenly AOE had to be involved in that because it is universal preschool offered in public schools as well as in private settings. So if I'm incorrect, please correct me, but I think that's where this all started and where it gets so confusing. And I don't see a great solution because AOE has to have jurisdiction over public schools, what happens in their public schools. If we were to take universal pre-K out of public schools, then yes, AHS and OPR could do their licensing thing and it would make a lot more sense than what we're trying to propose here.
Are we adding a third car to the train if we're involving
So.
OPR? Okay.
And I understand why.
Sure.
We would add OPR to this particular scenario because there are private settings that AOE just does not have jurisdiction over, and somebody has to.
Yeah.
But I almost feel like it could be somehow organized between AOE and AHS.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know what that would look like. So I'm just trying to clarify this situation for everybody as I've understood it, having been in this building for 8 years and listening to this discussion.
That was really helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No,
You're welcome.
we'll like pin that as a very valid thought bubble.
Yeah, if I could, the only technical addition would be that, like, that age, I would say we're really talking about birth through grade 3 if we're including our after-school programs, as well as any of our UPK programs that are Act 166 funded, right? So that's where that AOE license comes in. Once that program, even if they're working all the way down to those infants, they would need to have someone with our license in the building.
That's recent too, fairly
Yeah.
recent, because the after-school positions didn't really exist 15 years ago,
Right.
you know?
Yeah, and I think we need to think about the last 10 years and the next 10 years. I mean, realistically, I think like the infrastructure of our state is reliant on this mixed delivery system where we can't just say, these are private programs, these are the public programs. I think over the next 10 years, we're going to see even more crossover. So thinking about how confusion now could create further confusion in the future.
Nugent, then Pisnell.
I don't have much to add. I was, from what, Rapango was saying, but just that I remember, the director of OPR's testimony, talked about the terminology issue initially. So, and I've been wondering, yeah, if they had a suggestion as well, for a potential other term.
I guess so.
So when I was in college, if you went to, or if you got to do a bachelor's degree in early ed, it was from K to 5th or K to 6th, whatever. Is there now one that goes from birth to 5?
Yeah, so we have the elementary education endorsement, that's K to 6. And then we have our early childhood educator endorsement. And that folks can kind of pick and choose within it, but it's birth through grade 3. So sometimes it's someone who's working in an elementary school. They may do just PK to grade 3. Other folks may do birth PK and work exclusively in those private settings. That's not even getting into special education.
It's a whole nother topic.
It's
that
so
caveat,
much. It
yeah.
is so much.
Okay. So, do we have anything else for this witness while we have him
Hand
recall?
it up. I just texted. I don't think y'all are seeing.
Oh, sorry. Yes. Rep Stone.
I was wondering,
Apologies.
yep, no, it's fine. I was wondering if the AOE could speak about concerns about lack of continuity within the pre-K to 12 education system. I just heard the words, but thinking about special education in particular and curriculum, just do you have any concerns about this bill affecting those aspects of education? Just wondering if you think that it should be considered within the full context of our statewide transformation plan.
Yeah, I'll speak a little. I think that's definitely getting into the like Secretary Saunders territory of that larger framework. But we have had some internal conversations on really this idea of we should be having this larger conversation, right? We feel a little bit of like a tail wagging the dog right now. And so I think, if we are to move forward, having a change in that language to prevent confusion would be better. But yeah, I think we would much rather have a much larger conversation around the state of early childhood education and then work from there.
I think it would also be helpful too, at some point, for people to know that there are children who receive special education who are not yet of kindergarten age who go to the school to receive that. I was on education committee before. I have special training in earlier intervention as an OT, so I know this, but I don't know if our committee does, and I think that would be helpful for people to understand special education as it relates to early childhood education and the overlap there.
Yeah, and specific to licensure as well, right? So a lot of this framework is based off of the NAEYC standards, the I'm not going to remember that one. I don't have it in front of me, but the Organization for Early Childhood. So our early childhood endorsement, we took those same standards that are being discussed for this ECE proposal. And what we actually did for the AOE license, we've added a seventh standard around special education because we felt like the NAEYC standards did not address it strongly enough. So really that AOE ECE license is the NAEYC standards plus additional requirements around that special education, which is very, very critical. Having that early, identification at those early ages is really important to make sure that the students get services. And I know it don't like having a transition to this, but ultimately those high costs of special ed down the line get higher the later a student can be identified.
Sorry, and one more thing, could you speak to now how early childhood educators in public schools, the special ed teachers, currently go out to private programs to provide services to students? Could you just talk a little bit about how that's being done now?
Yeah, that definitely is outside my expertise. I can speak to it a little bit. That would come more from our special ed team at the agency. But my understanding is, one, it kind of depends on the districts, the partnerships between the districts and their programs. But in general, if a student is identified, they would then really rely on that relationship with the public school to make sure that the services and the interventions are being made before they end up. And that gets into that kindergarten readiness, which has really been identified as a part of our strategic plan as well.
Okay. Repengo.
Thanks. I just want to add that as a school board member, I'm aware of, especially in a very, very rural area, I'm aware that there are a number of different pathways for special ed for pre-K and younger students to receive services. Some are in the home, some are at school, some are at other non-public school settings. And it really is piecemeal depending on the community and what the resources are that are available in that community.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's why we want it to be a larger part of this conversation, because there is so many different, it looks so different in different parts of the states, and it really does need to have a larger statewide conversation.
More hands? All right. Thank you, sir.
I'll keep hanging out.
Yeah, please. All right, our next witness, Executive Director Nolan from King Street. Good to see you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here today. So my name is Shabnam Nolan, and I'm the Executive Director of King Street Center in Burlington. At King Street, we serve children as young as 18 months old, all the way through high school. We also serve their families as well. Our early childhood education program is not just a place for care. It's where children build trust, language, identity, and a sense of belonging that shapes their trajectory for the rest of their educational career. Our early childhood education program is also a Head Start program, meaning that every toddler and preschool slot serves Head Start families at King Street. We hold that responsibility with deep care. And I want to begin by saying we clearly believe that early childhood educators deserve to be recognized and supported as professionals. They deserve clear pathways for advancement and compensation that reflects the critical role that they play. At the same time, the field is in crisis. Just in last month, 3 preschool classrooms in Burlington have closed, most due to staffing shortages. As we consider policies to professionalize the workforce, we believe we must be careful not to unintentionally create barriers that further reduce the number of people who are able to enter and stay in the field. This is especially important for our immigrant communities who are critical to Vermont's future workforce. Many already face barriers related to language, credential recognition, and access to higher education. We need to ensure that the policy does not deepen those barriers for that population of our workforce. From our perspective, as an organization that operates classrooms every day, we would like to offer 5 key considerations as we advance the bill. First, We hope that we will preserve accessible entry points into the workforce. Our ability to serve children depends on our ability to build a workforce in a constrained labor market. At King Street, our classrooms are staffed by a mix of experienced educators and emerging professionals. Many enter the field through accessible pathways, and we invest in their growth over time while they are contributing to our classrooms. What has not worked for us is hiring solely based on degrees without cultural understanding or real-world experience. For us, a degree alone does not ensure an educator meets the needs of our community. Flexibility in hiring is what allows our workforce to reflect the cultural and linguistic backgrounds of the families that we serve. That representation is foundational to a children's sense of belonging and to their development. While S206 does not explicitly, as far as I can see, require licensure at the point of hire, there is ambiguity about whether programs will still be able to hire individuals that do not start with a license and then support them in working towards the credentialing over time. We believe this ambiguity matters. Without maintaining those flexible entry points, we risk narrowing the pipeline into a field that is already struggling to staff classrooms. Second, we believe it's critical that we support people and programs during credential advancement. From my read of the bill, it's currently unclear what support will exist for programs as educators pursue credentialing. When an educator leaves the classroom for coursework or training, we still need to meet ratios, maintain continuity for children, and run stable classrooms. This creates a real tension for us. We want to be able to invest in our staff, but we cannot remove them without backfilling them. And backfilling is extremely difficult for us to find in a constrained labor market. There's also a significant cost to us as an organization. Supporting credentialing requires substitute staff, overtime, schedule adjustments, and absorbing gaps when roles cannot be filled. This further strains the labor and workforce market of the people who are in that classroom as well. There's also a lack of clarity around licensure or other requirements for substitutes and temporary staff in the bill. If a lead teacher is out working toward credentials, who can step into that role? Will substitutes need the same licensure? Without clarity and support, programs may not be able to maintain safe staffing. If the bill moves forward, we believe it's critical that the state consider investing in substitute and float staffing capacity, paid release time for educators, direct resources to programs to maintain classroom stability, because professionalizing the workforce cannot come at the cost of destabilizing classrooms. Third, ensure implementation is financially and operationally feasible for organizations. As credential expectations increase, there is an expectation that compensation will increase as well. But the bill does not address how programs will absorb those costs. Early childhood programs already operate on thin margins. Without sustained investment, it is unclear how we would meet higher standards while also offering higher wages. At King Street, Act 76 was critical for us in stabilizing our workforce. We did exactly what was intended with that bill. Was when we got those increased subsidy dollars, we invested them in the salaries of our early childhood educators. And that helped move educators from far below a reasonable wage to a more sustainable one. But those gains that we made 2 years ago do not position us to absorb additional costs in another 2 years without additional funding. We think of cost of living adjustments alone in the span of time between when Act 76 was put into place and we saw the increase in subsidy dollars, and then whenever this might go into place and have implementation that ties to increased wages, we'll be behind without additional investment. So at King Street, we may be able to increase fundraising to help offset costs. because that's our model. But that is not the model of the majority of early childhood programs in this state. They do not use fundraising. Those costs get passed on to families. So there are real ongoing expenses, and without additional investment, these requirements risk becoming barriers rather than support. Fourth, we cannot lose an inclusive and representative workforce. At King Street, we've worked really hard to be in a place where many of our educators come from the same communities as the children we serve, including our immigrant refugee families. This is essential, not just in children benefit deeply when they see themselves reflected in their teachers. In race, yes, but also in class and in life experiences. And this is just as true in rural Vermont communities as it is in Vermont's immigrant communities. I want to share a brief example. One of our staff members holds a bachelor's degree in psychology from her home country and has prior teaching experience. Because her degree cannot be easily verified, she is currently working as an aide in our classrooms. She is an exceptional educator. And for the young girls in our program who wear hijabs, seeing her in the classroom creates an immediate sense of belonging. Her role is not a reflection of her ability. It's a reflection of system barriers. While Vermont has a process for recognizing foreign credentials, it often requires costly evaluations, extensive documentation, and additional coursework. These barriers can make it difficult for educators to translate prior experience into recognized credentials. We believe we need to ask questions such as, will prior education be recognized? Will there be accessible pathways to meet requirements? Or are we going to unintentionally turn away strong educators as we move forward? We must also consider language access. If pathways depend on navigating systems independently in English, that creates additional barriers, not just for those where English is not their primary language, but also for those incredibly strong educators who may not have collegiate level understanding of the English language. So as we strengthen the profession, we must ensure we're not narrowing who has access to it as well. Fifth, we believe the bill should build in an equity review. We all share the same goal. That's very clear. We want to elevate this field and invest in our educators. But implementation matters, and good intentions do not guarantee good outcomes. We recommend building an equity review into the policy so that there can be an ongoing evaluation of how it's impacting workforce diversity and access entry point into the workforce for diverse groups of people. We believe we should monitor how these requirements impact that entry because we already have a strained workforce. And if we narrow how people can enter the workforce or how they can advance in the workforce, we are not going to solve the crisis that we're facing today. I also believe we should be engaging directly with staff in programs across the state and not just a few directors of programs. This is a significant shift in the field, and it should be informed by those operating classrooms every single day. And I will tell you, of all the early educators that I have at King Street and the other ones I know, they do not know about this bill. And I find that to be quite alarming, that they don't know how this could fundamentally change their entire career and source of income. The bill has a strong vision, and we support that vision. But if we move forward without addressing workforce entry pathways, classroom stability, and equitable access, we risk unintended consequences that could reduce access for children and families. And I believe, while yes, we're in Burlington, and a majority of our population are from the immigrant communities, I'm not just talking about for immigrant communities. I'm also talking about rural Vermont, where, as we've already talked about today, there are so many ways in which people have to piecemeal together ensuring care for children, quality care for children. A lot of people don't have college degrees in a variety of places across Vermont, including rural Vermont. And if we start to put those additional barriers in place, when the majority of other professions are actually going in the opposite direction, they're trying to find more flexible pathways for entry and advancement, including in education. So We believe that with thoughtful adjustment and meaningful investment, this can be both a strong and a sustainable path forward. So thank you for your time and your leadership and commitment to children and families in Vermont. I'm happy to be a resource and to answer any questions.
Thank you. So can you talk a little bit more about what you were mentioned about how if people who are already working need to do additional education, when because we've heard that there is money available and scholarships and all this stuff, and I understand that that money is there, but I also understand it's not guaranteed for everybody. And so can you talk about that a little bit? And can you also talk about the time that it would take? Because this is what I keep thinking when we're going through this process is if someone is, I'm glad, and they should be making even more, they should be making all the money in the world, in my opinion, because these jobs are difficult and they're really important. But can you talk about how that's going to affect people's like financial situation if they have to go to school or take these extra hours? I'm not quite sure like how many hours it would be for a credit. And I don't know if you know this information, but let's say they had to pay for it themselves. Let's say they had to take time off from work to do these things. And I know that there are other careers that have continuing education. They do it on the weekends, they do it after hours, they do it as part of their normal work day. But the thing is, if you're like an attorney and you're doing that, then you're just taking on time from being an attorney. But if you're an educator, then you're taking time away from the children. Like you said, the substitutes, just trying to reconcile all this. Like, how much is it going to cost? How much time is it going to take? What? And then the ultimate question is, do these costs end up being passed on to the families that are paying for childcare? Or
Yes,
can you talk about that a little bit? Because that's been a concern of mine.
I'm happy to. So right now, King Street does invest in educators to be able to take time out of the classroom and get their credentialing. Because of those flexible entry points, we do hire educators who don't have all of the credentials, and then we build in time and financial resources of our own. And then Head Start also contributes financial resources for us as a Head Start program to be able to have those educators step away from the classroom. Yes, there are scholarships, and yes, there are ways to pay for additional education. Doesn't mean it's easily accessible just because the money is there. Irrelevant of the money, time is also a valuable resource, and not just for the professional in the classroom, but in their home and in their lives too. If you're a professional, like many of ours are, that has a family and you're working 40 hours a week, and quite frankly, in a career that is not the highest paying of careers, and you're trying to manage your family at home, and most of them, quite frankly, are women in the workforce, how, where, and when are they going to take time to continue to work and be able to support their family? A lot of times what happens for us when people really want to pursue their career is that they are having to take time on the weekends, time in the evenings. We find that our younger people are able to do that more so than our older staff are able to do. So the financial constraints are there for the individual. There's also time and resource constraints beyond money. And as I mentioned in the testimony, that's true for the organization as well. We're licensed programs. We have to meet ratios. When that educator goes, and we right now can control the pace of that as an employer, right? We can say, it's okay, take a year to do it, or take 2 years to do it, or whatever. Or we're only going to have one educator at a time do it. But when we're going to throw a whole field over the course of 8 years into having to up their degrees potentially and take that time out of the classroom, how are we going to sustain that level, that swell of being able to have people leave the classroom and do the education that's required of them. It's really hard for us to backfill when our teachers are out. And quite frankly, we can. What we ended up doing at King Street was hiring an additional position essentially to serve as a permanent substitute, because every single day somebody is out. And every single day, that means we risk closing the program for the day. It's 1 or 2 people out, meaning closure for the day. And what we found, and because we do have the ability to fundraise, was we're just going to build it into our model. We're going to build in having a substitute, like kind of like public school dues, right? And we're going to build that in, and we're going to ensure that we don't close programs. We used to have to close programs all the time. When we changed the model, we have had significantly fewer days of closure as a result. But that is a significant financial investment on our part. So if I have 2 people in class, I'm closing the classroom. So, you know, the financial barriers are there. Yes, there are scholarships and other things available. But it's not just about money. You take an educator who's been in the force for 25 years, who is an exceptional educator, and you tell them that they now need to go get their bachelor's degree, that educator will leave the field. They're not going to go get their bachelor's degree. They're going to leave the field. So I think we just have to be really thoughtful about not just looking a year down the road, but 5 years down the road to say, what's going to happen to an already strained and shrinking workforce when we put additional requirements on that workforce? And what does that mean for children and families? Because like I said in my testimony, we have not once in my almost 5 years at King Street been successful when we've hired an early childhood educator straight out of having a bachelor's degree in early childhood education program. They went to college for it. It has not been a successful hire with just that alone. It's not just about degrees that make good early childhood educators. And quite frankly, I don't know a parent or an educator who doesn't already believe this is a profession, who doesn't already deeply respect the people who are doing this work. They do deserve the compensation, don't get me wrong. And that's exactly what we've done with the Act 76 money. But compensation for them and financial support for the programs is going to have to continue to have investment if we really want the intended outcome and the implementation of policy. That answer your question?
Yeah.
Ish.
Yeah, no, it does. It's complicated. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you so much for the
Thank you.
time. All right, moving back to Zoom. We have Mary Harrell, Senior Director of Higher Education, National Association for the Education of Young Children. How are you? Can't hear you. It looks like you're unmuted. Hold on 1 second. We gotta.
Is this working?
Oh, there we go. Yeah,
All
you're
right,
here.
great. Hey, well, good morning. It's really good to see everyone. And on behalf of the National Association for the Education of Young Children, or NAEYC as I'm going to call it because it is a mouthful, thank you for this opportunity to speak at the hearing in support of Senate Bill 206 to provide some national context about the early childhood education profession. I'm going to call it ECE for short, and to address some of the concerns about the bill that have been raised over the course of the committee's deliberations. We have been proud to be a resource for and to support Vermont AEYC, Let's Grow Kids Action Network, and the Office of Professional Regulation in their efforts on behalf of and in collaboration with early childhood educators working across all ECE settings in the state to establish professional licensure for early childhood educators. Just a little bit about background of NAEYC. We are a professional membership organization, and our members are early childhood educators, ECE faculty, students, advocates, and allies across the country. And our mission, we are laser focused on promoting high quality early learning for each and every child, birth through age 8, by connecting research, practice, and policy. And we believe that one of the primary ways to ensure quality in ECE programs is by supporting and investing in the ECE workforce. So our work in advancing the ECE profession is guided by the unifying framework for the early childhood education profession. And this foundational document, published in 2020, is a product of a multi-year initiative to create a clear, consensus-driven vision and roadmap for a recognized and well-supported ECE profession. And a task force of 15 national ECE organizations comprised of multiple national unions, Head Start Association, organizations like NACE, National Association for Family Child Care Educators, our ECE higher ed organizations, all of these members who work with children birth through age 8 and across all ECE settings, engaged with and gathered feedback from tens of thousands of early childhood educators over the course of 4 years to recommend a proposed structure for the ECE profession. And as with other professions, there are common components within this profession that we envision and we're working toward. And these components include a very clear identity for who the practitioner is and a consistent nomenclature. And the unifying framework uses the term early childhood educators for our practitioners and defines those responsibilities. Another common component is that we have designated a core set of practitioner competencies. And in this case, it is the professional standards and competencies for early childhood educators. A third component of this profession is the proposed structure of 3 designations within it, the ECE1, ECE2, and ECE3 designations. And each of those has an expected level of professional preparation and a scope of practice that is attached to that. Professional licensure, another component that is common across other professions for early childhood educators to support both accountability for individual practice as well as portability of credentials across settings and across states. There's also a set of responsibilities for professional preparation programs, ECE employers, the roles of state and federal governments in supporting the ECE profession, and recommendations around compensation structures that truly reflect the competencies and the credentials that early childhood educators hold. And a final component of this profession is a professional governance body that supports the implementation of the unifying framework and also serves as designating the standards and guidelines for our ECE profession. And since the release of the unifying framework and as a member of the Commission on Professional Excellence in Early Childhood Education, which is the professional governance body, NACE's work has focused on efforts to support and elevate the implementation of and alignment with these recommendations within the unifying framework. And truly, Vermont is a leader in this, but is certainly not alone in this work too. And there's a lot of exciting progress in communities and states across the country, including but certainly not limited to, states adopting the professional standards and competencies. And we've seen this in Michigan and Rhode Island and Iowa and South Carolina. With this year, Delaware has issued an RFP to develop an implementation plan for establishing ECE professional licensure. Connecticut, DC, the Minnesota, Missouri, New Mexico, Virginia, they've all prioritized policies and made significant investments like Vermont to support and develop early childhood education as a respected and compensated profession. And DC, Florida, Missouri are examples of states that are aligning to these ECE 1, 2, and 3 designations. The written comments that NAEYC has submitted captures more information about the unifying framework. It links to the document. It also describes and links to a lot of examples of state progress related to this, and also includes the list of the Power to the Profession task force members. But I really would love to speak more directly to the context of ECE professional licensure and Senate Bill 206. As you know, the childcare landscape in which early childhood educators operate in states across the country, it's complex, it's fragmented, and unlike the public K-12 system, which provides free access to education and care for all age-eligible children and youth, there is no currently existing parallel system for our country's youngest children. And as a result, and has been noted during this hearing, by necessity, childcare and early learning for children birth through age 5, it's a mixed delivery system with programs based in homes, centers, and in schools. Early childhood educators provide an essential service in supporting each and every child in their programs to be safe, happy, healthy, and learning. And yet they are not currently or fairly recognized, supported, compensated, nor held accountable for their practice with these young children and their families. And certainly not within a context of a professional licensure system that the public relies upon to protect them, their interests, their investments across a wide range of industries. Early childhood education is not and should not be an anything goes profession. We know too much about the vulnerabilities of young children, as well as the science of early learning and the essential competencies for early childhood education to feel comfortable with the buyer beware market that currently rules so much of the childcare landscape. The lack of equitable, affordable access to quality childcare is harming young children and their families. Over the last few years, Vermont has made important and very significant public investments to address access to childcare in the state. And this bill and other initiatives builds on that to further address the quality and the stability of the ECE workforce. Protecting the public and public investments means working to ensure a floor of quality where parents can choose from any early childhood setting that meets their family's needs, knowing that the individuals who are licensed to practice there have a deep understanding of how children learn and develop and have complex skills and knowledge that can support them in effectively practicing with a diverse array of young children and their families, including those with special needs. And ultimately, we believe that professional licensure can be part of an effort to build supply rather than inhibit it, including in family childcare homes. We agree with the Vermont Office of Professional Regulation's own analysis in 2020, their regulatory assessment, that, quote, the likely policy benefits to be had from formalizing and transferring individual licensing of childcare workers would come from reducing barriers to entry and streamlining requirements, end quote. And here we emphasize that an effort to add regulations in one area should also be accompanied by an offsetting effort to lessen them elsewhere while protecting children's health and safety. And this is also clearly articulated in the unifying framework and our own work around licensure. We promote right-sizing regulatory environments by putting trust and autonomy for early childhood educators at the center. Professional licensure provides a way to both recognize and hold accountable early childhood educators for their practice with young children, formalizing and confirming consistent expectations for educators' professional preparation and competencies, and acknowledging educators for meeting those expectations. This will help elevate the status of early childhood educators as a skilled profession and support recruitment into the ECE workforce. Licensure would also serve as an important form of accountability to the public to assure families that early childhood educators are competent and safe to practice with their children. I want to talk a little bit about some of the concerns that have been raised about the bill and just focus on three primary areas. There's been a concern raised about using the term early childhood educator, and I'd like to provide some history behind why this term is important to the ECE profession. Early childhood education, it's a well-established and defined period of child development, and the National Institute of Medicine's 2015 report, Transforming the Workforce for Children Birth Through Age 8, synthesizes decades of research that documents this, and that documents the specialized skills, knowledge, and professional preparation required of individuals supporting the development of young children. When NAEYC and 14 other national ECE organizations embarked on our initiative that eventually led to the unifying framework, we quickly realized that the first step in creating a unified vision for this profession in collaboration with educators was establishing our identity. So the very first decision cycle in this initiative focused on solidifying a name for who we are as practitioners and our specific set of responsibilities. Many terms were proposed and debated, and early childhood educator is where we landed. The term addresses the specific focus of the educator's work and indicates that there is expertise needed and held as part of this role. And as with other professions, by using this term consistently across settings and states, the hope is to support the public's recognition of this work and the role of early childhood educators, and to support portability of credentials. We also understand concerns have been raised about including the ECE3 designation in the ECE profession. And we recognize and we agree with Vermont AEYC and the Office of Professional Regulation that recognizing the ECE3 designation as described in the bill does not duplicate nor supplant the ECE teacher license that the Standards Board operates. The ECE3 designation in the bill recognizes the large number of individuals who are not included in the purview of the Agency of Education. There are many early childhood educators who hold baccalaureate degrees who work in ECE settings that are not part of the pre-K-12 public school system that the Agency of Education oversees. And based on data from the Vermont Child Development Division, Vermont AEYC estimates that nearly half of Vermont's early childhood education workforce holds a bachelor's or advanced degree. This is a significant group of individuals at the ECE3 designation that, if not included in the proposed professional licensure system, would also not be included in the current teacher licensure system operated by the Agency of Education. And finally, there's a concern's been raised about that regulating early childhood educators would raise the cost of childcare. And it's an understandable assumption, but I want to share some research that we've conducted at NAEYC that actually points in the opposite direction. Every state is facing childcare shortages, and one of the most common ways they respond to these shortages is by reducing staff qualifications, increasing ratios, and or increasing group size allowances. And in 2020, NAEYC partnered with the Center for American Progress to study the impact of decisions to deregulate childcare in this way. We found that the quote solution had often the opposite of its intended effect. In fact, when states reduced qualifications and or increased ratios, this led to more early childhood educators leaving the field. They were burnt out managing larger groups of children and frustrated to be working with individuals who were not prepared for the job. And this increased early childhood educator turnover, exacerbated ECE workforce shortages, disrupted continuity of care for children, and it increased the costs for childcare programs. Through our research, we found, quote, no correlation between the strictness of state regulations and state levels of childcare supply, indicating that more stringent regulation is unlikely to have a large impact on childcare supply, end quote. And in addition, we have conducted multiple national ECE workforce surveys over the years to check in on educators and childcare programs well-being. When we ask early childhood educators what would incentivize them to stay in the workforce, better, fair compensation is always at the top of the list, for sure. But it is closely followed by better working conditions, including reasonable child-teacher ratios and working with colleagues and directors who are well prepared for their responsibilities. Our research on deregulation in the ECE workforce, coupled with the unifying framework, speaks to the importance of having a regulated ECE workforce that includes clear, consistent expectations for professional preparation and that holds early childhood educators accountable to the public. I want to close by emphasizing just the following 3 points. First, that Vermont has made extraordinary public investments in early childhood education, and it's important that those investments are safeguarded and protected, just like our children, our families, and our educators. Professional licensure is a path towards that goal. Second, the reality is that the status quo of early childhood education workforce isn't working. And while it's vitally important to address and mitigate concerns about the future impact, for example, of licensing fees on early childhood educators, the reality is that currently educators are spending valuable time and effort, often without any associated benefit to or impact on their respect, their status, their ability to advance in the field, or compensation. Professional licensure is a path towards changing that reality. And finally, given the uniqueness of early childhood education and the importance of early childhood educators to children and families in the economy, it's critical for any professional licensure pathway to be thoughtfully and intentionally designed and implemented with timelines, resources, and supports that recognize both the current ECE workforce and the future ECE profession. And we appreciate how the bill is addressing this. We hold deep admiration and respect for the educators throughout Vermont and the leadership of Vermont AEYC, the Office of Professional Regulation, the Vermont General Assembly, and others for grappling with the difficult questions and considerations in the course of moving this bill forward. And I thank you again for the opportunity to share our perspectives with you.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. Questions for the witness? Rep. Waters Evans.
What questions today? So when you were just talking about the effects of deregulating or loosening the restrictions, that's not what's like, no one's proposing that we do that. I don't think in this state. So this is where I get a little, I guess. So that leads me to my question, which is when you say that the current system isn't working, like what's not working about it?
I think so for in the current system for early childhood educators, they feel and they aren't recognized for the skills and knowledge that they have. And we have a system in which there are not incentives in general in place. Now, I think Vermont is making a lot of progress toward this, but incentives in place to support early childhood educators in gaining professional preparation that they are seeking and being compensated and provided career advancement opportunities that recognize the competencies and the education that they bring. The financing of the early childhood education systems it's not financed in the same way that K-12 is. And I think as a result, so much of the burden of the financing this falls on early childhood educators and the low compensation they receive. And it falls on the families that are paying top dollar for childcare. And that creates a system that is not workable for the educators within it who want to stay in this profession, but cannot afford to stay in this profession. We have and I think part of what is not working across the system and part of what we're advocating for through the unifying framework is building in a system that holds the early childhood education system accountable and professionals accountable for this. And that we want, through professional licensure and recognition, to be able to hold these credentials that are meaningful to the public, that are portable for early childhood educators so that when they change jobs, these move with them and it's not resulting in early childhood educators having to take additional courses or trainings depending on the setting they go to or the state that they might move to. So we want this system to be able to work for the early childhood workforce that is already in it, and to be able to recruit and incentivize individuals to come into this profession. And we know across this country, we are facing very significant ECE workforce shortages, and it is because it is not an attractive profession for people to work in for many. We want Alora to stay in this profession, right? And continue in this. And we don't want hers to be a unique story within this profession.
Thank you. I did want to I have two comments. That's okay. My first comment is, Alora, you got sidetracked, but thank you for your testimony. That was great. I feel like you're going to be awesome at your job for many years to come. And the other thing I want to say is just a general comment, which is, this is where I'm struggling a little bit, is being the first state to do such a thing, is that I like to just in general base these decisions on data and facts and information and proof from other people that have done it before. And not having that makes this, it's an added level of difficulty in figuring out what to do. And now I'll stop talking because I know we have one more witness and then we stop at 11, right?
Yes, no,
Okay.
I was like, that's actually a great segue to what I was gonna say before the next witness. I want to be very respectful of the work we're doing here right now, and so I'm gonna bleed into the 11 o'clock hour so we can continue with this conversation as necessary. And the cannabis conversation will happen a little later than expected.
Okay.
So I don't want anyone to feel rushed. Right now is ultimately what I'm saying.
Right.
So, and so that brings us to Danielle Harris, Senior Director of Youth Development, YMCA. How are you?
Thank you for having me. Good morning, Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair, and members of the committee. My name is Danielle Harris, and I'm the Senior Director of Youth Development at the Greater Burlington YMCA. Thank you for the opportunity to speak in support of bringing greater clarity and consistency in professional recognition to early childhood education in Vermont. The Y strongly supports recognizing our early childhood educators for the enormous responsibility they carry. They are professionals and they see themselves as nothing less. The Y supports several aspects of this bill, including the problems it seeks to solve and its overarching goals. We also appreciate the health and welfare amendments as we see these as improving the bill in several ways. Specifically, we support clarifying necessary credentials, explicit, well-defined expectations, strengthen the field, and ensure quality. Improved verification systems, accessible, reliable systems for employers to verify candidate qualifications are essential for both program quality and efficient hiring. We must face a simple and immediate reality. Vermont needs more qualified early childhood educators in the field. And like many industries in the state, we face a critical workforce shortage, and we're concerned that aspects of this bill could unintentionally exacerbate the challenge. The Y is concerned that new requirements may create new barriers to entry at a time when recruitment and retention are already strained. Program directors talk to each other and they compare notes. Many are operating at 80% capacity due to staffing shortages, turnover, and to allow teachers the bandwidth to better manage behaviors before risking serious burnout. We see experienced teachers leaving the field altogether or pursuing specialized roles that take them out of classrooms. And those who remain are carrying heavier workloads, which leads to burnout and further turnover. This is not a future concern. This is a daily reality for early education programs. Without teachers, programs close and parents and guardians are left without a safe and enriching place for their child while they attend work or go to school. One suggestion: conduct an economic impact study that evaluates the current and anticipated number of professionals in the field and their anticipated longevity in the field, the current and anticipated number of children served compared to program capacity, the examination of minimum wages for all license levels that addresses the true cost of care, and an examination of the total cost of the system. Vermont already maintains strong regulatory standards for early child educators. That's why we lead the nation in kindergarten readiness. Adding new layers of requirements should build on this existing foundation without discouraging entry into the field. We appreciate the clarity and simplicity of the ECE1, ECE2, and ECE3 levels. Current regulations are difficult to understand and navigate, and this framework creates a clearer path for both professionals entering the field and for employers evaluating candidates. We particularly appreciate that the education qualifications for ECE2 and ECE3 are unchanged. However, ECE1, the proposed entry-level position in this bill, appears to require significantly more training, 120 hours of training instruction versus the current 45 hours before they can enter a classroom. To put this into context, 6 out of our 14 assistant teachers in our early childhood programs would no longer qualify to work as ECE1. While we support preparation for both practical and safety reasons, it's equally important to preserve accessible entry points into the profession. We continue to advocate for employees to gain experience in the classroom, as this leads to better understanding of the field and greater retention. If the threshold to entry is too high, the pipeline of new educators may shrink when expansion is needed. A suggestion: maintain the current level of training hours for ECE1 and ensure as many pathways to entry as possible for all who are interested in joining this profession. As an employer, we appreciate how licensure has the potential to more easily verify candidate qualifications, as this is currently an onerous and time-intensive process. We would prefer to see a strengthening and streamlining of existing systems, such as BFIS, which we understand is undergoing updates. This could be more efficient and effective for the employee and the employer than introducing a new separate process. Perhaps examining the existing information technology, organizational assets, and personnel bandwidth currently in place at the state level to determine the feasibility of creating a centralized hub for employee documentation, credentials, training records, and violations. While we work to elevate the profession, we must ensure that there is a clear and accessible pipeline into the field. Building stronger connections between early childhood programs, high schools, colleges, and universities, or through social service network that work with new Vermonters could help create that pathway and address workforce shortages in a meaningful way. When we have openings at the Y, we rely heavily on traditional job postings and informal networks. Given the importance of early education in our communities and the economy, and the level of public investment made in the recent years, there should be a more intentional and visible pipeline connecting people to this profession and to programs on the ground. A suggestion: should we move forward with licensure, develop a formal framework that allows for greater coordination between the licensing body, educational centers, and early education programs, so that classrooms remain fully staffed with high-quality teachers, that our youngest Vermonters receive the care they're entitled to, and our communities remain economically viable. We all share the goal of high-quality care and education for Vermont's children. We all support recognizing early childhood educators as the professionals that they are. However, we must achieve both quality and accessibility. Requirements and qualifications can only help the industry if they avoid reducing the workforce or create barrier to entering it. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you. Questions from the table? Rev Waters Evans.
Would you say it's mostly women who work in early childhood education? This just occurred to me when you were talking.
Yes.
Okay. And also, you were my son Ronan's kindergarten teacher. And he's a freshman in college now.
Oh my gosh.
I know.
Now I feel old.
Trying to help.
Sorry, then I just was like, wait a second, I know Danielle. It was a long time ago. He's 19. And then my other question for you is, so can you talk a little bit more about your perceptions of like Vermont's current qualifications and the standards that we have? Can you talk a little bit more about like where they are in comparison to the rest of the country? Because I've heard that they're, or maybe somebody already testified about this, but I wanted a little more information about, are they stricter than most states? And what's the correlation, do you think, between like those qualifications, requirements and the quality of the child care that kids get here already? If you can speak to that.
I don't want to speak and not be correct in comparing to other states, but I do feel that our qualifications are, our teachers are held to high standards, and they do need to come with quite a few credentials currently. As someone else testified earlier, we have teachers who come in with bachelor's degrees and also do not feel that they can run the classroom. And so we always pair those teachers with teachers who have the credentials, but also have the experience. So again, I think a bachelor's degree is not everything.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else for our witness? Nope. See no hands. All right. I think we identified a couple of more entities that we want to talk to so we can discuss during agenda planning who to bring in next. But that was a lot to take in today. I want to thank everybody who came in. That was a lot of information to share, so it's greatly appreciated. So we're a little past 11 right now, committee. We hit the pause button on the Cannabis Control Board until 11:15. So we will take a break until then, and we will pick things up with Gabe and Julie. So with that, please take us off, Nick. And thank you everyone for your time and focus.